Sectarian violence, bomb attacks and kidnappings characterized the situation of Iraq over the past decade. The two main cities, Baghdad and Mosul, were ranked high on the list of most dangerous cities in the world. What happened to this potentially rich country with the river Tigris and Euphrates, known for biblical paradise? What happened to the church that is deeply rooted in Iraq since the 1st century? While the situation in Baghdad is still tense, field workers recently could visit this fought-over city and meet with pastors, bishops and patriarchs. The Christians in Baghdad shared their story about the developments in their churches since Saddam Hussein has fallen. For almost 25 years, Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq with an iron hand. Saddam dragged the country into dreadful wars, including the Iran-Iraq War in the 80s, taking the lives of over 500,000 people. He then invaded Kuwait, being the start of the Gulf War. A decade of international sanctions against the country followed. Saddam never was a very religious Muslim. But after the war in 1991, Saddam added the religious component to the conflict and blamed the Christians in the West for the situation in the country. Jonadam Khanna, now Christian Member of Parliament, started fighting the dictatorship regime over 30 years ago with the Peshmerga, the Kurdish fighters. And in 1979 he started the Christian Assyrian Democratic Movement to form a stronger opposition with liberals and Democrats against the regime.
After 1991 he was kicked out of Kuwait. Then he tried to draw the attention of Islam or Islamic global attitude, draw the attention that he is attacked by Christians of Europe and America. So he wrote Allahu Akbar on the flag, he started faith campaign. But I say fake faith campaign because they were lying, just to draw the support, attention of Islam countries to support it.
This had a negative impact for the church in Iraq. And since the early 90s, Open Doors has involved in supporting the church, training church leaders, but also bringing in Bibles by smuggling them across the river Tigris from Turkey into Iraq.
If you ask about our community in Iraq, Christian community in general, during Saddam time, it was a racist regime, chauvinist regime. There was security, but there was no peace.
The Christian community is a patchwork of Catholic, Orthodox and Protestant churches, divided over several ethnic groups such as the Chaldean, Syrian, Assyrian and Armenian believers. Era, a Baptist pastor in Baghdad, expressed his concern about Christians leaving Iraq.
The big challenge for the church in Iraq and the Christianity in Iraq is many of them left from Iraq.
While there are no exact statistics, the number of Christians in Iraq was over 1 million in the early 90s. A huge exodus of Christians is seen until 2003, which continued after the fall of Saddam. Today only a dazzling 1/3 of the Christian population is living in Iraq still. But, although they may be living inside Iraq, due to violence and threats, thousands had to leave their houses, especially from larger cities like Baghdad and Mosul. In Baghdad, for example, only an estimated 10% of the Christians are remaining in the city today. Many fled to the north of Iraq and to the so-called plains of Nineveh around Mosul. That does not mean the church is dead or has no future. The around 350,000 Christians is a minority that cannot be neglected. Pastor Norik is one of those pastors, determined to stay.
We stay and work here in Iraq with the people because we have letter from God, and we feeling we must stay here and service the people. Last 10 years till now, The situation in Iraq is very bad, you know. Everything, it's hard. The work in Baghdad is hard, especially for the people. It's very hard because there's no job for Christian, not easy stay in Baghdad.
When I graduate from Beirut, from the seminary in Beirut, it's very challenge to me to return to Baghdad. But the Lord is called to me to serve this community, this church in Baghdad.
In 2003, the Ba'ath regime of Saddam was overthrown. Saddam has fallen. But for the country and the church, it did not bring what they had hoped for. Initially, freedom and democracy was glooming both in politics and in for the church.
In 2002, we start home church, small home church, and grow up. When the Saddam government go, we start establish this big church. Yeah, and in the beginning we have just 13 members, and now we have 200 people.
After this time, after 2003, it's very easy to and very freedom to us to preach the gospel outside the church. But the difficult and the challenge for us is the peace or the security situation.
Stephen, from the seminary of the ancient church of the East in North Iraq, says,
the situation is not stable, and the people need to live better than, and they deserve to live better because they suffered a lot during Saddam Hussein's regime. But they are not, you know, they are still suffering. They are still suffering.
Before 2003, there was security, but there was no peace. Conflict between Sunni Shi'i, between Kurdish Arabic, against us, discrimination, and people were not happy. No justice and no peace. But there was security.
A positive thing was that for the first time in 1400 years, the Christian population was recognized as a minority in the newly drafted constitution.
After 2003, we succeed as movement, as MPs, to make the Iraqi new constitution recognize us as Christians in the constitution.
It's Christian message. We sharing the Holy Bible with the people and encourage the people to come to Jesus, because there's no love, no life, and no save anyone just with Jesus Christ.
After the first months of hope, extremely violent years followed. Islamic groups fought for power, and Christians and other minorities were caught in the middle.
Since 2003 till now, especially 5 years was the worst. 2005 started and until 2009.
It's a very difficult period in Iraq. All of Iraq, especially the church.
It's not difficult like 2007, but till now there's many problem in Baghdad, especially in all Iraq. And many times take threatened letters, especially for me and for church. Yeah. And that letter write, we can kill you, we try kill you very near. You must go from out to the Iraq. Close your church because we are do something bad for your church. Yeah, 70 people, 70 family, 70 family left from my church to another country.
So many problems, be killed or they be forced to leave their houses. The Christians are the least powerless people because they are the minority, especially after the flood of so many Christians.
And who is immigrating, either he has to sell his properties or to lose his job, and then either immigrating to Europe, America, outside, or to stay in Damascus or in North just to be safe. When there is an unstable situation or conflict, there is no development, there is no construction, there is no job opportunities. So people are obliged to flee. So this was the worst time.
That's why people are afraid. That's why people are leaving their own country. Not because they hate their own country. The soil is, you know, in our blood and our culture and so on. But, you know, if you don't have life, you cannot practice culture and you cannot practice your religion and belief.
For other side, from violence was targeting all political process, but we were the, I can say, weakest target, defenseless targets sometimes, especially from mafia, especially in Baghdad and Mosul city, because of the violence, because of the still mentality of discrimination is there, or abusing power.
The Iraqi government then took firm measures to prevent other churches from similar attacks.
We have security, yes, it's from the government. You know about the church bombing in 2010, so this is the to make a protect to the church.
Iraqi situation, it's bad, especially sometimes for churches. About that, Iraqi government put the police and the church near from church for protect the church.
The security situation is more stable in Baghdad, relatively speaking that is. Because still it is an odd sight to see armed vehicles, policemen and tall concrete walls in front of a church.
As far as the church is concerned, I am not very hopeful. I am very pessimist. I think that the situation is going to be worse and worse because most of the Christians are traveling abroad. They are not living here. The members of the church would be less and less in Iraq, and that is very sorrowful. So many priests in Europe or America, if you let them choose to come back to Iraq, they would not prefer to come back to Iraq.
So we will be suffering in these regions, especially Christian community, because of those extremism and fanatism. So we are pushing for peace process, for reconciliation in this country. When you have political consensus, then you have stable situation. Our country is very rich. I can say it's very, very rich. We have enough money to have good housing and good health sector and education and everything, and job opportunities for people. And we can bring back those who fled before as well, because they will have more job opportunity and more life opportunities here. And but sure, after we can succeed to make peace, after peace, and not security only, peace.
Many times explosion very near from my church, and every glass is broke. Many families from my church now don't send his child to the school because it's very dangerous. It's not easy for the people, especially for women, when coming from the home to the church. It's very dangerous, especially when in the evening when we go back to this home. Not afraid because especially I'm Christian, but afraid because I'm in Iraq.
No, it's a kind of chaos in ruling Iraq, because there are so many groups, and even Muslims are divided into so many groups, and inside those groups are smaller groups, and inside of those smaller groups there are so many terrorism and terrorists doing so many things in the name of Islam or in the name of any group. So each one is struggling, each group is struggling to get the power, to be number one in Iraq. Shia, who is ruling now, Maliki's prime minister's people. So they are, for example, bombing, Sunnah are bombing a church, and they are saying, see, nothing is controlled by the government. The situation, you know, is up and down, is not stable. Nothing can guarantee that the situation would continue as it is now. Nothing. nothing, no guarantee.
We encourage people to stay here, and we try find some small job for the people for stay here. Yeah, that's what we can do.
But I can say now, after 2009, when Americans withdraw from the cities, I can say we get an excellent step forward. Why? Because the recruiting card in the hands of terrorists was dropped. Why? Because their slogan was, please, we are in holy war, jihad against occupier. There is no more occupier. It is local police.
When in general the situation seemed to finally improve to some extent, suddenly the church was shaken again by one of the bloodiest attacks on the country's dwindling Christian community. Islamic militants stormed into the Syriac Catholic Our Lady of Salvation Church during evening mass. Bombs were detonated and many people gunned down. 58 were killed, including children, women and priests, in the most lethal attack on Christians since the fall of Saddam. 1 year after the attack, renovation plans have been carried out. The renovation was finished towards the end of 2012, and the bishop told that with the mass in December 2012, the church was full of people again, but that the church would never be the same again. The names of those killed during the attack are now written on the strip on the wooden ceiling encircling the church hall. Even throughout the most difficult years in Iraq, Open Doors continue to support the church through training and counseling Christians, bringing Bibles and other Christian materials, but also by bringing relief for internally displaced people. As well, thousands of Christians are supported through microcredits to set up their own businesses and creating job opportunities to help them staying in Iraq.
We hope that will reflect everywhere to recognize our Christian rights as communities and human beings.
In the world, pray for us if they can, to pray about the Christian don't leave from Iraq, and the peace in all of Iraq.
Every day we receive courage from God for we stay here. The whole world pray for us, for God change the Iraqi situation, God take peace in Iraq and all Iraqi people.
Please pray for Iraq.